Huh? What did I? You got that, yeah. Okay. So each group, well, let's see. I don't know how to, you know, if one group goes first, they take everybody else's ideas, and then what's the point? I don't know. Then it's not a group discussion. All right. Well, let's just, so what do we think the priority is? How do we talk about something having more value than something else in a teaching situation? It's true of ATM too. If you put everything but the kitchen sink into your ATM teaching, it's not as effective as if you make certain choices. So we were talking just, I want to acknowledge that we were talking amongst the staff while you were doing it, that I'm maybe bringing up a new subject, you know, because if you haven't had a lot of scans in the training, if you haven't done a lot of ATM analysis in the training, you know, you may not quite be, I might be talking about things that you haven't heard before, so don't worry, be happy. We're just starting the subject. Okay. If you don't know, it's because you haven't spent time on it. But we're going to spend time on it now, all right? Okay, just to say that. Because we're discussing, probably need to put more scans into trainings. Well, anyway, probably every segment starts with a scan. Okay. So go ahead. One group. What'd you think Nicole, what'd you think the priorities were? Maybe I'll call on people. How's that?
Yeah, I was probably being a bit dogmatic in my group. It's hard not to be sometimes. I really felt like it was really important to zone in on just a few things.
Okay.
Not everything.
All right. So what are those few things that you thought were important?
It was feet, I think, with flexion and
feet?
Feet, and the way the feet are making contact with the floor.
Okay.
The heel particularly, and how turned out the foot is.
So we're just going to mention one thing, are we? Is that the idea?
One or two. Well, you haven't talked the whole time. You can say 7.
Okay.
No, just say a couple.
Well, VB said, I thought it was a good one. It was bottom of the sternum, was it? Bottom of the sternum and the pubic down there.
The distance from the bottom of the sternum to the pubic bone?
Yeah, so sensing the space.
Don't mention the pubic bone on your first class. No, I wouldn't on the very first class. You gotta break them in gently, BB, I think. I don't know. Would you, Margaret, talk about pubic bone in the first class? No. No, that's that's our secret until we let it out further. But no, we're joking, but I'm serious. You know.
So what we meant to plan, I was just doing it in this context, not necessarily for a first ATM. So we were meant to design it for a first ATM.
Yeah, well, for a flexor ATM.
Yeah.
But, okay, a flexor ATM could be your first.
Which can be a first ATM.
A basic flexion lesson will be, for many of you, it will be in your basic series, if you give a basic series. Okay. All right, well, these are your ideas. Let's hear some other ideas.
Just the distance between the chin and the top of the sternum.
Yeah.
And the space between the floor and the cervical and lumbar spine.
Okay, that's
or
getting
lower
warmer.
Back and neck. Sorry, neck and back.
Getting warmer. That's going to be more pertinent than the pubic bone. Okay, good. We're going to look and clarify it in a minute. All right. Well, most of you do talk, but I don't know about you, Leonie.
I had one more.
Okay.
So one of my own ones was with the length of the spine, how it's touching the ground, and also because I think the this was bending. So the shoulder blade to the pelvis. Yeah.
The distance from the shoulder blade to the pelvis?
To the pelvis, yeah.
You know, that is so general. I don't know what you mean by shoulder blade. Or I don't know
the
what you mean by pelvis.
The scapula
what
to
part
the
of
hip.
the scapula? It's
the
general.
right scapula to the right
What
hip.
part of the right scapula?
All of it. No.
Okay. For distances, it's general. So, because I don't, actually, I'm just going to take myself. I don't know. I'm probably making it up because it was 1976. So do you think I can really remember back that far? But, you know, we kind of invent it after a while. But let's say if you had said to me pelvis, I didn't know where the top of my pelvis was. I didn't know where the outside. Pelvis was a general muscular sensation of stuff. So we can think about this. How far from the bottom of your shoulder blade to the top of the pelvis? Now I have something I can try to look for. If you tell me shoulder to pelvis, I don't know. It's your choice. But you see what I mean? Okay. All right. Leonie.
We mostly talked about the space between the floor and the lower middle back area, and also the space under the knees too.
Yes. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay.
Yep.
Because this is like the number one priority. This is more the priority. This is more like the fundamental thing. Okay. Jinlim?
So I was also in Leonie's group. We also talked about the weight of the head, and then and the space between the knees, back of the pelvis, and back of the neck.
Okay. Spaces. I would say the answer to this question, the simple answer to this question is spaces. What else? And I'll clarify it. I'll make sure it's really clear for you, and we'll see where yours fits into theirs, because it fits, but we can tidy it up a little bit and make it fit even more clearly. Okay. Yeah, everybody. Well, Marissa, I don't know. Have we heard your voice this segment?
Not today.
Not much.
Yeah, we were talking about the spaces as well, but we also spoke about the pressure. So the pressure on the back of the head, the back of the shoulder blades and middle back, and the pressure on the coccyx sort of bottom area.
Well, pressure is the mirror image of spaces. So it's all, there's either pressure or there's spaces, or there's the relationship between the pressure and the spaces, which I would also use talking about the spine. Okay.
Yeah, so we're talking about that, and then we were sort of we did have a bit of discussion just around whether you would draw attention to all of those or just some of them, or whether you would keep it more general and just getting them to sense where the pressure was, rather than actually saying sense the pressure on the back of your head, sense the pressure on the back of your shoulders, sort of thing. So we had a little bit of discussion around that, but we didn't really come to any conclusions.
Okay. So, all right, let's look at this. I think we have enough information. Are we missing something really important? Yes. Breathing. Okay. We're missing breathing. Well, Dan, I hope it's Dan. Dan was looking at distances, for instance, from shoulder blades to pelvis. You were looking at distances from sternum to pubic bone.
Well, that was the creative one.
But what kind of distances are you interested in?
It was the other distance was going to be between the bottom of the rib cage to the top of the pelvis.
Maybe it's not as kind of
Clear.
It's not as kind of top priority as the spaces and the pressure. So let's look. I mean, you guys get to decide. It's your conditions. I'm going to give you some things to think about. I won't be there when you're teaching, so if you want to put in some distances, but we have to understand, you know, what we're just thinking about what we're up to here. So who has a big arch? Who typically, you're all changing so often now, but do you have a big arch under your lower back? Fairly? Did you know I was going to finish my sentence like that? Okay, so if you lie down, will you have a big space under your lower back? Okay. Does anybody, who are my candidates for a big arch under the lower back? You. Okay.
Can you see with this?
Of course, you've had that FI and everything. It's hard to. I don't know if I fixed you. I showed you another possibility. So come lie down, Nicole. So well, you know, maybe we'll have you show your old pattern. And then the minute you do that, everybody's going to understand why you were so busy thinking about your heels. Because, no, I mean, it's interesting. Did some people think, what's she on about with heels? Okay. Okay. But the thing is, if she, so I can put my hand under, she has it. Actually, it's in this part. I've got my hand under there very easily. So this is lifted. Okay. So if you think of the physics of the thing, if you think of the spine like a chain, in order for these vertebrae to be lifted up here, some other vertebrae are going to be going in the opposite direction. So which parts would maybe be pressing more into the floor? The tail, her tail would be pressing more into the floor, right? So this is lifting, some other parts are pressing more. Well, all right, just keep that in mind. But let's say we start at the bottom. Can you feel, and I'm going to do it really quickly. Later, I'll give you an example of a slower timing, but just, I don't want to take up all your time right now. So feel the way, now, do we want to do right side, left side? Probably. You could do both feet, but I think to educate the person, it's easier. So the way your right heel is in the floor, the back of the calf muscles, space behind the right knee. And by the way, whoa, space. Okay. The back of your pelvis, lower back on the right, ribs coming up, the right shoulder blade. I'm not going into a lot of detail. How the shoulder presses, left side, da-da-da-da, come back. Again, feel the space under both ankles. Oh, you have to feel the space under both ankles, under both knees, space under the lower back, space under the neck. I agree. Distance of the chin from the chest. I agree. Because, for instance, if she's like this, and you ask her to feel the curve in the cervical spine, it's very difficult for us to feel the curve in the cervical spine because we don't get any feedback from the floor. And so one way that we can get a sense of how much space there is to give a second reference, which would be the distance from the chin to the chest. So if the chin is, and all three things, the space under the neck, the chin from the chest, and the pressure of the back of the head on the floor go together as a piece of knowledge of finding that curve, okay? So,
Getting uncomfortable, actually. But this is the way I used to be.
yeah. And so, and if you exaggerate it even more, Nicole, feel how your heels really press. So you're busy feeling things about your heels, right? Do you see what I mean? Her heels are more prominent in her experience of herself than someone who does, can you do the flexion? See, now this space came down, this space came down, and this space came down, right? Okay. Do we have, thank you. Do we have somebody who's the opposite, who likes to flex a lot? As a tendency. I mean, we're not going to stick you in those categories, but do we have somebody whose lower back likes to press a lot into the floor? Or who could just show us? pretend to be like that? Did you want? I don't know. I mean, you just looked like you were ready to come up with a little encouragement. Okay. So now you're giving the same scan to Nicole and Leonie. So, but for Leonie, huh? I'd like you to push it down. Yeah, let's see what happens. Okay. So, what does that do?
It feels different when I'm pushing it. I'm feeling like my chest is moving.
Yeah. Well, if you're really flexed, this is also coming way away in a different way. Okay. So, all right. Well, so if I ask both, let's just say I ask both these people to feel, all right, so you're feeling the spaces. She has no space under her ankles. She has way less space under her knees than you do. She has no space under her lower back. Under the neck, you would have some space, but I mean, we all do. Okay. But now, if I take the idea of the spine and I say, okay, so we've done the general thing, spaces, 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 and now come back and feel along your spine. Where do you press heaviest into the floor? Which parts of your spine press heaviest into the floor? So for you, it would be here. For her, it would be there. And which parts press the lightest? So now I have to compare different parts of myself, different pressures relative to the floor. And I start having a sense of that chain, right? That it's not an even distribution of pressure, but, you know, I don't know that it could be. And we're not talking about the even distribution of pressure now. We're just saying, where is it the heaviest? Where is it the lightest? And she has to look around and search for it. And she's going to feel the discontinuity of her spine. She's going to say, oh, that's interesting. I really just feel this point and this. I feel 2 points in my spine, right? So this question already is much more specific. And then at the end of the lesson, you worked your flexors, and so your extensors are going to stop working so much, and you worked your flexors, and so your flexors are going to stop working so much. It's a win-win, and I don't have to study the muscles. I don't have to worry about rectus abdominis and things like that. No. Okay. No, but I mean, so both of you are going to end up being more similar to each other. And both of you are going to end up with a more even distribution of your spine on the floor, because your lower back is going to come down, and probably for Leonie, when this, well, she's not all that flexed, but let's say if this were to get, if this were to stop pushing back, let's say, I'm going to exaggerate, but let's say if this were to stop pushing back, then, so you'd be more maybe really like that, then she'd get her length in the upper part. Wouldn't you? You could imagine that. Yeah. Okay. Because if she were, let's say if she were really flexed and round, this would be round up here. But with the more even distribution, this stops pulling the chain, the length, she'll probably feel it up here. And the shoulder blades will be lying differently for sure. Yeah. Dan. Thanks.
Can I just ask, when you said the spine, can you feel the spine? Would you say, could you be more detailed and start with the sacrum and then start with the thoracic, or would you just say spine, which parts are the heaviest? Or
you can probably do it either way. You could say, I mean, we're going to have an example of a very detailed spinal scan this week, but I feel I need to give you at least one scan before I go home. But you know, you could say, and now starting at your tail and moving up, feel which parts come away from the floor, which parts press more heavily, or you can do a general thing. I think I've heard it both ways. They both work, depending. I mean, the thing about picking our shots is that, so now usually when I give this exercise, there's some groups that come up with very, very elaborate now feel the the distance from your right hip to your left shoulder across the diagonal and this way and this way. And you can, because if you do these diagonal movements, that will also change. But if you go into too much detail about something, then you've kind of lost the clarity of some of these things. And so at least you should know what the main things are. And then if you want to lightly put in, what do you think about the diagonals? Do you have any opinion about that, Julie? Or you're not thinking about that right now? Okay.
No, one of the ways I work that stands.
Yeah. Yeah. Microphone.
I would do the lesson and then really feel what I noticed.
Right.
Because
afterwards.
I had to come a lot from my sensation initially.
Sure.
Yeah. And then as I went on and I could understand the lesson more, I'd get more of an idea of what I would expect.
Yeah. I mean, that's just part of the same thing.
Yeah.
That's like the whole business of ATM analysis is going to be doing the lesson and feeling what's changed. And then you don't have the whole objective thing. You have a subjective thing for yourself. So you do the lesson. I mean, a lot of us would do the lesson 3-4 times before we taught it. People are kind of surprised in trainings when they find out that it takes time to prepare for these things. So, and then there'll always be a few variations that you don't understand because you're not there yet in your own organization. It's a blind spot. And you talk to your friend and they understand it, and you don't know whether to believe them or not because you don't really, but it's a process. So that is one way to do it, right? Is to really feel what's changed. Okay, good. So with the diagonals, I'll leave that up to you right now, but pressure and spaces, right? And this question came up about the scan, which is, and I think I asked a friend of mine who had spent more time with Moshe than I had, so I guess I thought he knew something or other, but I think I had discussed with him, we discussed, generally speaking, the scans start from the feet up or the head down. What do you think?
We discussed that for some time.
Good. Well, let's hear your this group is cooking. These quiet, speak softly and carry a good idea. Okay.
We debated backward and forth, and I think it comes a little out of our own experience too. So people expressed, the fact that that's how they had been doing scans generally, and we just had different ideas. We just went with one way, which I think was to start with the feet up in the end.
Why would you, generally speaking, it's the feet up. There are exceptions. There are scans where you might start with the back of the head on the floor and other things. But why would generally speaking it be from the feet up? You don't know? Yes. Yeah. Because ultimately we're going to connect it to that how we are on the floor has some relationship to how we are when we're upright. Yeah.
I realized something. Okay, what I've learned in this session, one important thing is that I tend to think about myself and how I've learnt. We were talking about, I was saying, notice the gap, notice the space, and then several people in my group said, is there a space? Because for me, there
Words.
always is a space. So when I'm working with other people, probably the sharpest thing on my body is my shoulder blades.
Yeah.
Therefore, I draw my attention to that.
Yeah.
But,
Well, this Sue is what makes it a very interesting life, because if you have a few good friends that you can exchange ideas with, it's really wonderful. And you know, as Julie said, she started with her own experience. That's what we start with. And then you see sometimes, I mean, I don't know your teachers, a lot of you who you've been taking classes with, but for instance, in some trainings, I know the teachers really well, and I hear that their students use their language, right? And it's that teacher's language, and you know, they just copy it, because you'll listen to a tape you've done in here and you'll copy the language, or you'll come up with your own language. But unless somebody tells you something like don't say body, the two main things are you don't say body and you don't say try. And we do occasionally say try from a lack of a better option. But Moshe in his early lessons said try every other word. And then in his later work, he almost completely eliminated it, because he realized that it was a contradiction to this idea of less effort to keep saying try. Okay, so, but yeah, I mean, and we will teach the ATMs that we love, and if we didn't like them in the beginning, we tend not to choose that one, you know. So it's all very subjective until little by little you fill in your blind spots, and you and your peers, you know, converge more and more in your understanding. But it's a process, and it's good. All right, so we're going to do, not for a couple more days, on Friday, we're going to do, I don't want to tell you too much about it, but you will give somebody a scan. So I'd like you to go back in your groups of 5 now, and just everybody with their own piece of paper. How much time do we have before? Oh, well, we have 5 minutes before lunch. Is that enough? Oh, we can give you 10 minutes. Well, I don't have to break exactly. So take 10 minutes, and then just write out for yourself a scan for a flexor lesson, and just decide the main things you want in there. And remember, Madhavi said the breathing, and everybody has their own notes, so that on Friday you can have something to refer to. Make it, you know, you can make it a little longer, a little shorter, depending.